is a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Kristin Pelletier of KristinPelletier.com. That's Kristin. Last name Pelletier, Pelletier.com. Kristin's career in dentistry encompasses a broad range of experiences in all aspects of managing a successful dental practice, from assisting to office management to software training. Today, as a dental management consultant, her comprehensive services are bringing success and transformational change to a long list of clients who are benefiting from her expertise and results-driven consulting style. Kristin, thank you so much for coming on my show today.
Thank you, Howard. I'm so excited to be here.
I love getting consultants from Kansas and Wisconsin, because so many of all the flyover red states, as you call them, a lot of people think in order to be successful, you got to be in Beverly Hills or Key Biscayne, Florida, or downtown Manhattan or Sydney. And can people really be successful? And I mean, I was born and raised in Wichita. And there's just a lot of more people that practice in something like where you and I are from, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, than Beverly Hills. What does it take to be successful in Tulsa, Oklahoma these days?
Really, I have clients all over the United States, and it's interesting to me that some of my clients that are in some of even the rural areas in Oklahoma sometimes have the most successful practices. They have great numbers, a nice overhead, and they're living, a really abundant life living in a small town in, Oklahoma, USA. So I think that it's really not always the location that creates success in a dental practice. There's so much more to it than that.
But it does seem like every time I meet a dentist who's like bringing in $1 million and taking home $350, it seems like they're far more rural than urban, because there's just so much more competition in Scottsdale than Parsons, Kansas. Do you think that's true or false?
Absolutely, I think it's true, because I have clients in both scenarios, and the clients that are in some of the rural areas really do very well because there's not as much competition, and they have a pretty large patient base. And surprisingly, sometimes they even have a hard time finding an associate or a partner just because they're not in one of the prime locations or the locations that other people would consider a prime location.
My God, every time I'm talking to a dental student, I just say, go rural, go rural, go rural. I mean, there's so
I
many
would say the
towns.
same thing. I agree with you 100%. I would say the same thing.
And how rural is rural? I mean, how small are you talking?
I really don't know with the population what the population would be, but this is a school that it's on one campus would have the middle school and the high school. It's just a really small farming towns essentially in Oklahoma. And I actually learned from Kathy Jameson years ago, listening to her speak, because she's from Oklahoma. And I worked in a small town as an office manager in Claremore, Oklahoma. And I remember her telling the story about how their dental practice became a huge success in Davis, Oklahoma. And that really inspired me to see that the potential really is in some of these smaller towns.
So who is your average client base? I mean, who's calling you? I mean, what is their story? Do they have a more common profile? Are they older, younger? Who's calling you, and what are you doing for them?
The majority of the doctors that I work with have been in practice. Most of them have been in practice at least 5 years. I do have a few that are just starting or transitioning into purchasing a practice, but most of the people that I work with have been in practice about 5 years. They've established some level of success, but they've either plateaued or maybe they're not satisfied with what they're doing. They're hitting their goals every month, potentially, or maybe not hitting their goals every month, but it's that overall satisfaction with what they're doing, managing their team, covering the overhead, dealing with all of the stresses of insurance, and they just really want more fulfillment out of the career that they've chosen in dentistry.
So, what do you, the purpose and the mindset? You talk about having a clear purpose and being aware of limiting beliefs. What do you mean by that?
Well, I've always been a big believer in how mindset contributes to success, but it was actually in 2014, it was a few years ago, I was really kind of taking an assessment of, all of the overall results that my clients had achieved over the previous year. And as I was doing that, everybody really had good results, but there were a handful of practices that really stood out, and they just had these really just extraordinary results. And I wanted to look at what is the difference. I'm the same consultant, I'm providing the same guidance and the same information. So what's the difference between these practices that skyrocket and have unbelievable growth compared to maybe an office that has average growth? So I started to really think about it and narrow it down. And the two things that I noticed that were in common with all of these superstar practices, one was they had a purpose other than making money in their practice, and their team was really bought into that idea. And it wasn't the same purpose in every practice, but they had a purpose driving them other than just making the most money or reaching the production goals. So, for example, one practice, it was taking the fear out of dentistry. Another practice, it was about restoring people back to health. They liked really advanced implant type cases and just restoring people to function. I had another that was, really passionate about creating healthy smiles or beautiful smiles. And so the whole team buying into that really made a big difference in their results. And then the limiting beliefs really come from practices that are willing to take a look at the things that are really holding them back. And sometimes information isn't enough. And I've been a consultant now, I'm going into my 10th year, and it took me a few years to realize that there's a lot more to success in dentistry other than just knowing good, solid practice management systems. Because these practices that were willing to look at their limiting beliefs, for example, an example of a limiting belief could be if insurance doesn't cover it, our patients won't want to pay for it. That's an example of a limiting belief. But the practices that I work with that are willing to examine that and say, wait, is that really true? Or is this something that we're saying that's holding us back? They've really reached just tremendous levels of success in their practice.
That is so well said. I mean, it's funny. It reminds me of two things. You said that they have a purpose and could be like treating fear or health or beauty. Um, they always. My dad had 9 Sonic drive-ins, and Sonic was actually started in Oklahoma. Did you know that?
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Oklahoma City. My dad's his mentor there was Jim Williams had 1,000 Sonics. Roger Carpenter had 100. My dad only had 9. But they always said in the restaurant business that people only go back to a restaurant because they got that one thing, that one craving, and they're coming to Sonic because they're craving a cherry limeade or tater. There's got if your restaurant doesn't have that one thing,
Right.
and you're saying they got to have a purpose. They got to have that one thing. And I love what you say about the mindset because in economics, they always say, if you said, well, what is the number one thing you track that predicts the future the best? And they've always said since day one, it's consumer confidence. If your consumers are confident in the economy, it's going to grow. And once the sheep gets scared and they don't have confidence, it's going to contract. And
Right.
and that's what you're saying, purpose and mindset. You got to have that one thing, and you got to have a great confidence in your future. So
And it's, yes, and it's so much more than just saying, okay, we're going to check this off our list. Our purpose is going to be, and then fill in the blank and hang it on the wall and say, okay, this is our purpose. It's so much more than that. It's the doctors really owning that purpose and really inspiring their team to buy into that same purpose. And so if it's something that you only talk about at your annual team meeting, that's not the example that I'm giving with these just superstar practices. It's living it every day. And when things get tough, saying, well, how does this fit into what our purpose is? Whether it's insurance restrictions or anything like that, it's saying, well, what is our real purpose here, and staying true to that, and being able to lead your team to help make that purpose a reality every day.
So you've mentioned insurance a couple of times, and you talk about an insurance-driven practice versus an insurance-aware practice. You've been in dentistry 23 years, and 23 years ago, it was all indemnity insurance. You just submitted the bill, and the insurance just told you what percent are they going to pay. 100% for this, half for that, 80% that. Now
The
it's
good old days.
complete. Yeah, the good old days. Now it's completely changed where the insurance said, we don't even care what you charge. Here's the fee. It's a PPO. And now 82% of dental offices have signed a plan, and the average is about somewhere between 8 and 12 plans. How do you navigate around that in your consulting?
It really depends on the practice what my recommendation is in terms of participating with PPOs. I have clients ranging from not being on any PPOs, and I have clients that the majority of their patients are on a reduced fee program of some kind, whether it's a PPO or some other type of plan.
But
And
is
so
that but is that the urban rural split? I mean, whenever I find a doctor not taking any PPOs, they're always in a town of 25,000 or less. And then when I meet a doctor in a town of a million or more, they're always on every PPO. Do you see that, or is that not what you see?
not necessarily. I mean, I think I have 3 clients in the last 12 months that have really focused on reducing PPOs, which that's not my main focus. It's just the practices had such tremendous growth. They really were having a capacity issue, and we had to do something to help with just the overwhelm of the abundance of patients that they had. But I had one that was in a really small town, and that was pretty straightforward and easy. But I had another one that was in Edmond, Oklahoma, which in Oklahoma is probably the most competitive city. And I wish I had the population. I don't have it right offhand, but it's definitely a competitive area, very saturated with dentists. And this dentist, was able to reduce down to she just has one PPO left. And I think the key was it was the groundwork that we laid ahead of time. So it's definitely not something that I would recommend for a new client that I was just starting to work with. It's a practice that has really focused on what their purpose is and really focused on overcoming some of these limiting beliefs that are holding them back. And they created such an abundant practice that they had to decide, did they want to go with an associate model, or did they want to reduce the number of discounted programs?
But what do you mean by when you talk about what is the difference between insurance driven and insurance aware?
So I think that it's really important that practices are insurance aware. And insurance aware is knowing the details about a patient's insurance plan so we can give patients the very best estimate possible. I think that's our responsibility to give our best estimate. And everybody knows that it's just an estimate, but I think that it's important for a practice to do their homework to give the very best estimate. We need to know if there's a missing tooth clause. We need to know if there's a waiting period. All of those things that an insurance company will give to a dental practice if they call. And so being insurance aware is understanding how that patient's plan works. So when we do go over financial arrangements, we can give them our very best estimate. Being insurance driven is when you take that information and bring it into the dialogue with the patient and potentially use it to dictate what the treatment recommendations are. For example, even something as simple as a maximum, most insurances have a max of some type of dollars that they'll pay out per year. Treatment planning and taking that into consideration and maybe not being comprehensive because of that maximum is definitely not in the patient's best interest. And what I see, and I know this because it started with me, I used to do this as a treatment coordinator. And then as I started consulting, I was seeing this happening in other practices, is sometimes we feel like we're being helpful by going over all of those details with the patient, but really it takes the focus off health and puts it more onto the insurance plan. So being insurance aware would mean telling the patient, this is your total fee for treatment, and this is your estimated out of pocket. And we know that that's a good estimate because we're very aware of their plan. Being insurance driven would be either altering the treatment plan to match the benefits or saying during the financial presentation, and your insurance is only paying this much, and then start listing the reasons, because you only have this much per year, because there's a waiting period on this, because there's all of these different limitations. And it starts to make the patient feel like, well, maybe I should hold off on this for another year, or maybe if my insurance isn't covering it, there's a reason why. So it's just putting too much focus on the details of the plan with the patient.
And to me, lecturing around the world, I mean, out of 240, there's 220 some countries. Only 20 of them have dental insurance. I mean, they don't even have this in China and India and Africa and South America, where all those people. I was just in Malaysia, and they're all buying these $800 iPhones out of pocket. and the people buy their root canals and crowns the same way they buy their iPhone. And it was amazing being in Malaysia watching these, what you would think, oh, these people are poor, and they're walking in there buying Invisalign while they're
Yeah.
holding an iPhone. Then you come back to rich old America, the richest country in the world, and people say, well, I'm sorry, your insurance won't pay for this, and it won't pay for the implant. We'd have to do a bridge or a partial. And it's like why in the richest country in the world, where people buy their house with cash, their car with cash, their iPhone with cash, the mani pedi. What's the most you ever spent on a pair of shoes and your hair done?
And more than I'd like to admit.
Right, and then that treatment plan coordinator thinks that the insurance driven, and then starts presenting the treatment. Well, your insurance won't pay for an implant. Your insurance will
Right.
only pay for this, and we have to wait 6 months. Like, they didn't wait 6 months to buy the iPhone 7.
Right, exactly. And I think that when practices can really look at those limiting beliefs about what patients really are willing to pay for, and instead of focusing on being the insurance experts and educating the patient on insurance, turning that around and educating them on the health aspects of it. And I think that there's too much focus on insurance, and sometimes I get, I get some comments or some feedback online because people sometimes think that I'm saying don't don't call and check on benefits or don't understand the patient's plan, but that's not what I'm saying at all. Only use that for our internal information in a dental practice to give the patient the best estimate. But all of the other insurance conversation needs to be left out of that financial presentation unless the patient asks a specific question. I mean, you can obviously answer it, but I think that the focus really shifts from health to insurance very quickly in that treatment coordinator role. And the dentist sometimes isn't aware of it, or sometimes the dentist initiates it. I've seen handoffs from dentists to the front saying, now, Kristin only has this much insurance left this year, so we're going to wait to do this until next year. And even if they had a very talented, skilled treatment coordinator, the patient has already been prepped by the dentist to let insurance dictate the pace of treatment. So I think just leave that out of it and focus on health.
The number one cost in a dental office when I got out of school was labor, about 25, 28%. Now the number one cost in dentistry is the adjusted production off your fee and what the PPO will pay, which is estimated to be 25% for the country and as high as 40% for individual practices. And then on top of that, then you have almost a full-time person up front just calling insurance companies all day long. Do you see any software to find out what this insurance is going to cover, or is it so complicated, and with so many plans, you still recommending a labor intensive someone picking up the phone and calling Margaret's insurance company to find out exactly all these clauses in her plan?
I think the software is great for to verify that someone's coverage is still the same after they're a patient, and maybe it's the new year or something like that. But I haven't personally seen a software that can gather all of the information that's needed, specifically for all the different types of treatment plans that might come up. They're just not that comprehensive. But I know that things are improving, and hopefully that comes along the way. I really do think that, but I do think that you shouldn't put your most talented team member calling insurance. I was just in a practice not that long ago, and someone that really had a lot of talent and could have been a great person to talk about treatment with patients and educate the patient on the why behind treatment was on the phone the majority of the day checking benefits. So I think for a comprehensive treatment plan, there probably are things that you have to call to ask, but I would definitely recommend to maximize the automated systems, the checking online, or even some of the virtual assistant programs that someone can do it remotely for you, and then maybe call on the things that you need specific answers for.
One of the easiest ways to go from a $750,000 office to a $1.5 million office is the same patient flow, the same city, the same dental office, same everything, but you double your treatment plan acceptance rate. And
Yes.
it seems like one of the biggest debates in dentistry. Some old guards say, I was horrible at it for 20 years. And then I hired Mary Jo, and she was half as pretty as you are, Kristen, and she could just sell all these cases. and that was the best move I ever made. Then other dentists say, no, the dentist should be presenting the treatment. So my question to you is, how do you increase treatment plan acceptance? Is it getting a treatment plan a treatment plan presenter? Because the bottom line is you can't get into dental school or med school or law school unless you have really good grades. And the only people in college that got really good grades were the introvert, shy, geek nerds who sat in the library every day and didn't have a girlfriend and didn't have a frat and never had fun and never got high. And so the natural selection is, well, who ends up being all the dentists and physicians? A bunch of people who didn't have enough personality to become an engineer or an accountant. You got all these introvert geeks. Can they really sell dentistry? When you're in the trenches, can you take the standard dentist and get them to really excel at treatment plan presentation acceptance? Or do you say, come on, doc, you're a dentist for a reason. You don't have enough personality to become an electrical engineer. Let's get Mary Lou to do this. She's excited and full of energy. How would you coach a dentist to increase their treatment plan acceptance rate?
I primarily work with dentists that are in private practice. I would say 1 to 4 dentists around that size, to give you an idea of the type of practices that I work with. And for a small business like that, to me, it's pretty scary to have your business and your livelihood and your overall health, really, of your patients relying on one person, and that person not being the person that's guaranteed to be there long term, which is the doctor. I don't work with marketing. I don't help dentists get more new patients. That's not anything that I help them with, but yet it's not uncommon that I have a practice, sometimes even double in a year, and it's because the dentist learns how to create that want with the patient, where the patient wants the treatment, and then they can pass that patient to a treatment coordinator, and that person needs to be skilled, they need to have a good personality, all of those things, but you don't want your practice really hinging on this one person being there. What if that person moves, or what if that person decides to leave, and you have to go through these ups and downs, and it's this roller coaster. So the clients that I work with, I teach them in their own way, so it feels authentic. I'm not trying to turn an introvert into an extrovert or anything like that, but in their own way, their own voice, making a connection with the patient that creates value, lets the patient know that the dentist cares about them, and helps motivate the patient to want to get healthy. So I'm a big believer in the dentist being the primary person to start that conversation and create that want, because people come and go. Turnover, I don't know about in your area, but my clients have all experienced some level of turnover. But the ones that have really focused on case acceptance personally, that they've really invested in taking more ownership of that as the doctor, they can have team members come and go, but it doesn't have this huge impact on their practice. So I think it starts with the doctor for sure.
What's funny is that turnover in dentistry started with the interstate system. Before, at the end of World War II, when President Eisenhower built these interstates, almost all Americans were born, raised, reared, and died and never went 50 miles away from home. Mm. And then they built that interstate system, and now the 117 largest cities where half of America lives experiences 10% transient turnover per year, because it's so easy to get a U-Haul and move from Tulsa to Kansas City.
Right.
So back to treatment plan, case acceptance. When I talk to dentists, they'll all tell you they hate to sell dentistry. They hate it. They didn't go to dental school 8 years to be a salesman. What's the common homie that you're dealing with who is an introvert dentist, doesn't want to sell dentistry? What are you doing to help these people present treatment?
A couple of things. The first thing goes back to knowing what their purpose is. Is their purpose to help their patients be healthy, or what is it that they're passionate about? Because I don't want to be sold. I don't want someone to try and sell me on something. But when someone really is genuinely caring about something and they're communicating that with me, I buy into it, because I can really feed off of their passion and their excitement about whatever it is that they're selling. So the very first step is to know what your purpose is. And I think some of those limiting beliefs come into play and make the dentist come across more awkward, because they're dancing around things like insurance. or money, and they don't really know how to communicate that effectively. What I recommend is very, very simple, because it has to be something that any dentist that I work with, that they can pick it up right away and start implementing it right away. And it starts with the know, like, trust factor. I mean, your patients have to feel like they know you, like you, and trust you. And that, we could talk about that for a whole segment. Just, it starts with answering the phone and every aspect of your practice. But if you create a good environment and the patient has some level of knowing the dentist, feeling like they like them and trust them, then it's just really being authentic about what they believe and not allowing insurance or fear of the patient's going to think I'm after their money. Some of the limiting beliefs I hear from dentists are, if I tell them everything I see, they're going to think I'm just after their money. Or if I tell them just a little bit at a time, that will be better than letting them know they have several areas in their mouth of concern. Or if I tell them just what's covered by insurance, then they'll do it, and I'll tell them more the next time. So there's all of these limiting beliefs. And so what I do is I help dentists understand that patients buy what they want. It goes back to what you were saying about the iPhone. People will find a way to buy the things that are important to them, the things that they want. Just look at smartphones or the types of cars that people drive, vacations. I mean, every person listening probably has had at least one experience of a patient checking out with a several $100 handbag saying that they can't afford the fluoride treatment that isn't covered by insurance, right? So it's creating that want with the patient. And patients don't buy root canals, crowns, buildups. They buy what that will do for them. They buy being able to function, having a confident smile, being healthy, all of those things. So I teach them how to communicate dentistry in a way that makes patients want it.
And one crude example of people get what they want is in 1980, when I was a freshman at Creighton University, Ronald Reagan started the war on drugs.
Yeah.
People want drugs. 36 years later, look at all the money they've spent in the DEA and name one American city that isn't filled with drugs.
Right.
So
or people that sometimes there's people that smoke tobacco and maybe it's really not in their budget to spend $5-6 on a pack of cigarettes a day or whatever. It's people find ways to buy what they want. And so when I have practices say something, let's just use fluoride as an example. And I know every dentist has a different philosophy on fluoride and what patients can benefit. But let's just use a practice where the doctor really does believe that fluoride can help most of their patients. But most of their patients don't accept fluoride. That's really the patient's declining is really holding up a mirror to the practice, saying this is how well you're communicating value to your patients. It's not that insurance doesn't cover it. I mean, it's under $50 in most areas, and so it has more to do with the value that is being presented. I'll give you an example. I was in a practice, and they actually had a really healthy, very well-run periodontal program where they really believed in having healthy gum tissue and how it affects your overall health and all of that. They'd gone through some clinical consulting and they were really excited about that. But the doctor wondered why he really didn't have very many patients doing fluoride at all when it's something he believed would help them. So we took a closer look. And it's interesting because the majority of the team, the reason they said patients wouldn't want to move forward with fluoride was because insurance didn't cover it. And so I pulled up some perio statistics and said, these patients, I mean, you have a very high percentage of your patients that are accepting treatment outside of what's covered by insurance. It's not the 2 free cleanings a year. So why is it that they're really on board with this? They're agreeing to pay for a couple of cleanings out of their pocket per year. They're paying their deductible and a percentage just to get to that point of maintaining. So why do you think they're okay with that, but they're not with the fluoride? And it was awesome. The team on their own said, they're buying into our belief behind what we're telling them about periodontal disease. And we probably don't have enough belief behind what we're saying when we talk about fluoride to our patients. And they really worked on it. And within a month, their fluoride more than doubled as far as what they were getting acceptance on. So it was a mindset thing. It had nothing to do with their patients.
So you've been consulting for, you've been in dentistry 23 years, you've been consulting for a decade, of just going after just last year's average customer with you. What would you say the average dentist that's called you up and that you're working with collects a year in dentistry? What's the size of their office?
Wow, let's see. I have a pretty wide range. I have practiced, let's just start with the solo practitioner, ranging from, I had one client that started and they were just under 600,000 per year in collections. And then I've had others that it was a solo practice. And when I started working with them, they were already at the 1.3, $1.4 million range. So it's a pretty wide range.
But you said so as low as 600, and for a solo practice, you're
Yes.
saying the range is 600 to 1.4?
Yes.
Now, now, homies, listen to this. Listen, because I know so many of you are under 30. So the average dental office in America does 675. And that was Kristin's low customer. And then as high as 1.3 or 1.4, which would be 2 dental offices. And I'm going to beat this to death. You always think you're going to fix your practice by going into CAD CAM or buying a laser or buying a CBCT or learning how to get into sleep apnea. And I always say in the 29 years, it'll be 30 this year, May 11 will be my 30-year anniversary of my dental office, that all the dentists that use consultants get the highest return on investment. And that is why you see Kristin saying, well, her low is the average dentist. And it goes all the way up to a double practice. And if you want a return on investment, don't learn how to place implants, do sleep apnea and Invisalign and all this other shit. Get your house in order by buying a damn consultant. And every 100% of all my friends that do 3 to 5 million a year and are as old as me have probably used 5 different consultants in their lifetime, and say, I've never hired a consultant that didn't school me on something, and I didn't get all my money back at the end of the year when I paid my taxes with the IRS. So, I mean, it's just the biggest return on investment.
I agree, and I think that's true for any business. I think one of the best decisions I made personally, the year I started my business, I hired a business coach, someone in the dental industry. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I didn't want to understand. I didn't want to learn the hard way on my business model. And so I've worked with coaches every single year. I still work with a coach. I've worked with several different coaches, and I think that it's really important. They help point out your blind spots, and they call them blind spots for a reason. You can't see them yourself. And I can point out other people's blind spots, but I certainly can't see my own. And so I've always been a really big believer in coaching. I think it's really important that you find the right coach, because I'm not a fit for everyone. And I know that sometimes when I hear stories, if I hear, oh, well, consulting didn't work for me, or I have this negative view of consulting, typically it's either because they didn't have the right fit for them. And I think that's so important, or they didn't do the work. And so I think that it's really a good thing if someone's willing to invest. And my clients, I mean, they get their return on investment many times over. Typically, I mean, my personal goal is, just because it makes me feel better, is I like to get them their return on investment in 3 months out of the 12 that we work together, because then the doctor can really relax into the process, because they feel like, I've already made my money back, the first month or two. And so now I can really just focus on the growth, and I don't have to stress about this investment I just made.
Okay, well, you're talking to a lot of dentists right now. You said that consultants are a perfect fit. Who's the perfect fit for Kristin?
The perfect fit for me is someone who is really willing to focus on the other side, not just the systems. Systems are important. I teach systems, but they're willing to look at the limiting beliefs that are holding them back. They're willing to step outside of their comfort zone and really lead their team, and that they have really a no excuses approach to diving into this process, where they want to really excel at what they do. They want to have a thriving business, but more importantly, they really care about their patients. I think that's so important to me. One of my clients that I worked with a few years ago wanted to focus on case acceptance, but it wasn't a huge priority because he was pretty comfortable with the amount of money he was making. And when I ran a report to show him what the case acceptance was, out of the treatment presented compared to the treatment scheduled, the case acceptance was in the teens. I think it was at 18%. And it really hit him. He said, I look at this as a report card. Are you telling me that I'm not a cosmetic dentist? I'm pretty needs based. I only recommend things that are absolutely necessary. That of everything I'm recommending, only less than 20% of my patients are accepting. And that really got him excited about working on case acceptance. And it wasn't even about the money for this doctor. He wanted a higher level of health for his patients. So I like working with dentists that love dentistry and what it can do for people. I'm really excited to work with people like
And
that.
what is this? What is your program cost? What is it, a year? Is it, how does it work? What are the, this is Dentistry Uncensored. What does it cost? What are the terms? How does my homie do this with you?
I have a pretty wide range of programs that I offer, so the range is pretty wide depending on how comprehensive and the size of the practice. But let's just think about like a one or a two doctor practice. I have services that range from 3,500 all the way up to close to $50,000. So there's a lot of room to customize something for a practice and what it is that they need. But anytime a dentist asks me about cost, the very first thing I let them know is, one, I absolutely guarantee my fee. There's no locking into an agreement with me. A client can cancel at any time, and I've actually never had that happen.
You don't have it in you don't have contracts?
I have a contract, but it states that either party can end within just 30 days notice. I also guarantee my fee, which is it's silly almost because my goal is to get my fee many times over. So it's easy for me to guarantee my fee, but sometimes for someone new, it really makes them feel comfortable knowing that this is a really no risk investment. And they don't even have to implement everything I say for me to guarantee my fee. If they just implement 75% of what I say, or even half of what I say, my fee really isn't an issue.
And if you're in dental school, what you should have just heard is say how important it is to not have a contract with that girl you're dating in your class. And if you're going to sign anything, it says that either party can cancel with
Yes.
30 days notice and walk away no money. Because that is, if you think your student loans are a burden, wait till you get divorced.
Yeah.
When I talk to dentists and I say, what's keeping you up at night? Number one, no questions asked across the board. It's the staff. They're driving me crazy. It's HR. Oh my God. I mean, half the time they love them. Half the time they're going crazy. I mean, really.
Yeah.
You take 5 dentists to the bar after a seminar and drink some beers and watch the ball game. It's just staff nightmare after staff nightmare after staff nightmare. Do you see that, or are you not seeing that?
I do, and it really goes with the being willing to step outside of your comfort zone because many of the doctors that I work with that are really struggling with their team, they do a lot of venting, whether it's to me or to colleagues or to their poor spouse at home at night, or and they feel this temporary relief from whatever it was that frustrated them during the day, but they keep venting to the wrong people. And so they feel better, they blew off some steam, and they go back, and then something else happens. And so when I work with a dentist, I really coach them to look at that and to address things head on and to really focus on communication and leadership. And so it's definitely something that I focus on, and dentists that are willing to really develop themselves as leaders, that has a huge impact on their results as well.
Yeah, everybody talks about how there's so much gossip in society, whether it be at work, church, play, whatever, and all gossip is misguided communication. So
Yes.
when your sister's telling you about your other sister, you're like, okay, you're telling the wrong person, and then you're gonna feel better, and you didn't solve your problem. You need to pick up the phone and call your sister. I mean, same thing at work. Like a dental assistant telling you about the hygienist. No, you shouldn't be telling me. I'm the dentist. You're talking about the hygienist, and you shouldn't be talking to me. You should be talking to the hygienist. How do you get when I see a dentist at rock bottom, his staff is in disarray. They have different tribes. The front, the back, the front won't do this, the back won't do this, and blah blah. What do you do? What is the problem when you go into an office where the staff is just working the doctor up in a frenzy? What usually is the problem, and how do you solve that kind of stuff?
Most of the time, if I uncover all of the different layers, the issue really is the doctor not addressing things early on. So they wait until it becomes a big problem, and they almost pretend not to notice that all of these things are festering behind the scenes. So the main thing is addressing things early on with the team, and it's avoiding conflict is usually why that doesn't happen. As far as the team systems, it's a lot of it's misunderstandings. It's people see things through their own lens, and so the business team has the lens that they're looking through, and the assistants and the hygienists. And when I do team workshops, I would say the majority of them, I have the whole team come. If we're talking about something that has to do with a financial system, the hygienist needs to understand a big part of what the business team is dealing with, so that person can really support them and their team member as things are being implemented. So I think involving the team in areas, not just the ones that they work in every day, but in the other areas, really creates this sense of understanding for what each team member goes through on a day-to-day basis. I also think that reluctance to fire a team member sometimes keeps someone that is just absolutely poisonous to the team on for way too long. And I see it almost completely, almost destroy a practice or a team. Let's say it destroys the team. And sometimes, the doctor will eventually let that person go and then say, I wish I would have done that, a year ago, 6 months ago, 5 years ago, whatever it is. But they allow it to cause so much damage and destruction with the team before they actually make a move because of fear.
So kids, you always hear that, think outside the box. Success is counterintuitive. You're a social animal that is a 2 million year old species. There's been 100 million humans since Adam and Eve, which they think was 2 million years ago. And you have to work together as a group to hunt and survive. So you're hardwired not to have an uncomfortable conversation. And the most successful people are the ones who are ready to have the most number of uncomfortable conversations. So
Yes.
you see all this stuff festering, but you don't want conflict. You're a social animal like a dog, a cat, a monkey. So you want to avoid conflict. You got toxic Mary Lou over there who's just poisoning the entire staff, and everyone knows it, but we don't have a decisive coach. Vince Lombardi wouldn't let a toxic player be on the Green Bay Packers for 4 seasons, but you've letting the craziest woman ever found in Texas stay on your team for 4 years. And another thing I've noticed is that when I go into an office, and there's a lot of staff turnover, but one girl's been there 10 years. That's the poison. That's the girl who's ran everyone off for the last decade. And I mean, and it's like you could come in and diagnose that in 38 minutes, and Doc can't figure it out in 10 years because we're hardwired to avoid conflict. I want to, another problem in practice management that doctors will tell you at the bar is they'll tell you that they feel bad because they really don't know their numbers. I mean, like you said that doctor didn't know his treatment plan acceptance was 18%. They oftentimes don't even really know what their overhead is. They really, they just don't know their numbers. So is any practice management software better than the others? And how do you school a dentist at getting better at knowing their numbers?
It's interesting you asked me about practice management software. I was a Dentrix certified trainer and seminar instructor for the first few years as I was getting my business started. And I would go into practices that were converting from one software to Dentrix. And what I've learned is that there are some really good dental practice management softwares out there, and all of them are underutilized. And so one practice will jump from one software to the next when really they just needed more training. So I think there are some great softwares out there. I really like EagleSoft. I love Dentrix, probably because I'm most familiar with it. But they're all great, but they're all underutilized. And I would say to doctors, don't try and cut corners when it comes to software training. I think that if you have a team that hasn't gone through comprehensive training, I would have a trainer come in quarterly until the team has really mastered the software. Another thing, one thing I don't like about practice management softwares, and I think they're getting better, is it's really more of a patient management software.
Absolutely.
Than it is practice management software. And so it's hard to go, you could be overwhelmed as a dentist just clicking the reports tab and seeing all of these reports. And all it does is give you data, but what do you do with that? And how does that compare to others? And is this normal? And all of those things. So I think that it can be overwhelming without some guidance initially, but the numbers just tell you so much about your practice. I usually spend a lot of time just reviewing a practice's data before I ever go in to observe. And I really have a pretty good idea about what's going on in the practice just from looking at the numbers. And I love teaching dentists how to do that for themselves. And they may not get as excited about the numbers as I do, because I love looking at numbers and analyzing a practice through the numbers. But at least they know early on if a system isn't working the way it should, or if there's an issue in their practice, so they don't. So they just feel more empowered. They don't feel like they have to rely on someone else to tell them how their business is doing or how their systems are doing.
Well, I mean, it's from 1895 to 1936, all the movies were silent. So you had radios, phonographs, and from 36 and 5, that'd be 41 years. It took 41 years before somebody to fall down with chocolate in their hand into a peanut butter jar and say, hey, you can put peanut butter on the chocolate. You can add sound to the music. And I can't believe I've been a dentist for 29 years, and not one person at Dentrix or Eaglesoft or Open Dental has realized that until you hook up that patient practice whatever crap with accounting, with QuickBooks Online, until you add the accounting module to the Dentrix Eaglesoft Open Dental module, you don't have a practice management system. And so we're still in the era of silent movies. I don't know if we should just go to Dentrix and try to give everyone there a bong and a drop of LSD and think that maybe if they dropped acid and took bong hits, they'd say, really? There's accounting software? There's Quicken? Really? This might have some impact on managing a business? I mean, because they'll sign up for a PPO, and if you had your accounting software, you would know that when you're in there for that operatory for an hour, your costs are $275. So if you sign up for a PPO that's paying you $240 for an MOD composite, and the girl up front schedules you for an hour, you're gonna lose $30.
Right.
And I know it, Quicken knows it, but not one person at Dentrix or Eaglesoft or Open Dental, I mean, they're in this silent movie saying, well, why would you want sound during a movie?
Right.
I mean, so until we end the silent movie era, and I've gone there in person, I've begged them, I've flown to Minneapolis, St. Paul, I even went to Effingham, Illinois, where Eaglesoft is. You know where Effingham is?
Yes, I've heard of it. Yes.
In the middle of effing nowhere.
Right.
And talk to them, and they just look at you like a deer looking in a headlight. I mean, they don't see the vision.
Right.
And so that's gonna be sad. Don't pull my string on that. Oh my God. I mean, okay. So I'm going through what the dentist whined to me. I just lectured New Year's Eve at San Francisco. So after the seminar, we stayed up because it was New Year's Eve. But it was HR. Next is going to be overhead. Do some of your clients call on you because they say, Kristin, my overhead, it's just out of control. Is that a very common issue?
It is, and what I've found is that all of the things pertaining to case acceptance and having really a health or some type of a purpose in your practice, whether it's healthy patients or just restoring smiles, whatever it is, you can't get acceptance just to the insurance level and have a profitable practice. Not unless you want to really give every team member a pair of roller skates and get ready to just, I call it turn and burn all day just to barely make your overhead. And so you have to be able to get patients to accept the higher level of health, not just the $750 that's left after their initial exam and cleaning. If you're only doing that for patients, then one, they're not as healthy as they can be. And if your passion or your purpose is to help people get healthy, that gets in the way. But two, you just can't sustain a profitable practice only getting case acceptance up to what insurance covers. And it worked when I started in dentistry. I remember those days of the plans that just had that straight 180-50 percentage of coverage, and that was it. That's all you needed to know. And you could get away with being a little bit more conservative. And when I say conservative, I'm not talking about the type of dentistry, but trickling recommendations in a little at a time, even though the needs are there today.
Yeah. I mean, if I went to a cardiovascular surgeon and he said, "Well, I don't want to tell Fat Howie he needs a quadruple bypass. I'm just going to do one coronary artery bypass a year for the next 4 years," or I don't want to tell him they got two tumors. I'm just going to take out one. I mean, you should just go in there and diagnose the whole case and present the whole case, and your insurance will pay this and your portion's that. And another thing I want to tell the young kids that the old saying, "A fool and their money will soon be parted."
Hmm.
My gosh, the more money they have, the more they're going to push back on the price. And well, can't we just? The reason they're millionaires is because they don't spend their money. They've got more
Right.
money. And the other thing I've noticed is that so many millennials will see someone pull up in a nice car with a nice handbag and say, "Oh, she's got money." Yeah, she's probably leasing her car, credit card debt out the wazoo. And then old grandpa comes in and they go, "Well, he don't have any money. He's an old man and he's old and he don't have hell, and he's sitting on $500,000 in a savings account. The reason he
Yeah.
has $500,000 savings account because he don't spend any money. And when he tells you, "My God, that's a lot of money," well, big deal, Grandpa. You need this, and I just can't tell you how people misread other people's financial statements all day long. Like in Scottsdale, if you see someone in a Mercedes Benz and a BMW, they're leasing it. They don't have a pot to piss in. You see someone with a Buick in Phoenix, they bought that car in cash and they got more money in their savings account than anybody in Scottsdale. And so many young dentists, they do. And so you shouldn't read into people, whatever their eminence front. I remember that song by The Who, Eminence Front. It's all a put on. You're the doctor. Tell them the disease. Tell them the treatment plan, and don't let this visual whatever you're seeing interfere with your doctor stuff because you have no idea how much money they have.
And they're coming to you because they trust you and they believe that you are going to tell them what is best for them. And by holding back or not telling someone the best that dentistry has to offer, they at least deserve that they have the right to decide for themselves the level of health that they want. And it's up to the dentist to tell them this is the best that dentistry has to offer and let them know the benefits and then let the patient decide. And if the patient decides that they'd like to look at um, some alternatives that maybe aren't as ideal, then let that be their decision. Don't lead them into that decision because of your own assumptions.
So, Kristen, how many times does a client call you and say, "I need help," and you go there and you analyze everything? You say, "The problem really is everything's going pretty good. You just need more marketing. You need more patient flow." Is that usually the problem? Because let me ask it another way. Do a lot of dentists sit back and say, "Well, the reason I have high overhead and I'm not as profitable and all this because if I just had another 10 or 15 new patients a month, I'd be right there, and I don't need Kristen. I need a marketing SEO, someone to do social media, or is that is usually the problem? They need to do more marketing and get more new patient flow, or is new patient flow usually not the issue?
It's usually not the issue. I can't recall of all the years I've been doing this that was my first recommendation. And what typically happens is I go in and identify potential that's already there. It's really right under their noses, and they just don't know how to tap into it. And that generates so much revenue and production, and it's filling the schedule, sometimes even adding more hygiene days, all of these different things, and none of it came from spending more marketing or money on marketing. And if they do get to a place where it's time to look at bringing in more new patients, you certainly wouldn't want to do that until your systems were solid and you had that foundation. It's just throwing money away. And I'm not against marketing. I think it's a really important part of growing your business. But first, look at the potential that's already in your practice. What do you already have that you can turn into growth? And then the other is before you start marketing, making sure that you have the systems to convert those callers and those patients that are inquiring to your practice, you can convert them into patients, and that you can get case acceptance above just whatever their maximum is on their insurance plan. So that's where I would start before I would recommend marketing.
So what you just said is you get your house in order. You
Yes.
think you think you're going to get your house in order by doing a bunch of marketing or learning how to place implants or adding sleep apnea, and that is all baloney. What
It's
you
a
need to do
distraction.
is get
It's
a
a
dental
distraction.
consultant to get your house in order. And once you get your house in order, you'll find out you'll already be profitable, everything will be fine. And then go do all that stuff because it's your purpose. It's your
Right.
passion. You
Yes.
want to place implants. You want same day dentistry. You want to be a cosmetic dentistry, but you can't reverse that order. You got to get your
Right.
house in order first.
For example, if your average case size that you get acceptance on is, let's say, $800 or even lower, um, why invest in learning to place an implant if your team isn't successful getting case acceptance on a case higher than $800? Because implants, I'm assuming, are more than $800 in most parts of the country. And so it's before you try and jump to that bright, shiny object, which really is
Bright
avoiding.
shiny object. I
Right. It's
love
like,
it.
oh, I'll do this or I'll do that or whatever. It's looking at what your practice is telling you in terms of what the potential is and what are the areas that really need, um, cleaning up, or like you said, putting your house in order.
When I go to the ADA convention, it looks like a bunch of cats following laser pointers. You know what I mean? All these cats going from one shiny object to another shiny object to another shiny object and everything. And it's like, okay, everything in here is not the problem.
Right.
Then they'll go to like 4 courses on adhesive dentistry as if their bonding agent was the problem.
Right.
And they'll memorize all the wear rates and megapascals of bonding as if all your fillings wear down and fall out. It's like if the dentist focuses on it, it's not even the problem. So your
Right.
problem is basically everything you're thinking about ain't the problem. What are you not thinking about? The business. You don't know your treatment plan acceptance. You don't know your average case size. By the way, you said average case size 800. This is the bias I always see from dental office consultants. The average case acceptance for the 211,000 licensed dentists in America is $488 per the big insurance mavericks. But see, Kristin thought 800 because the people that call consultants do twice as much as the dentists who don't do consultants. Again, I mean,
And I think 800 is low.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think 800 is low. The majority of my clients have $1,500 above that for their average case size. And these aren't dentists that are super aggressive as far as treatment planning or anything like that. They just really learned how to communicate the best that health had to, the dentistry has to offer in terms of making someone healthy and get acceptance on it. Their average case size is $1,500, really minimum.
So 1,500 for your average client is 3 times the national average. And then I can't tell you how many dentists are. I'm if you're listening to me right now, I'm calling your bullshit because you're driving down the highway thinking, well, I bet mine is 1,000, 1,500. Dude, you have no idea what yours are because
Right.
you're thinking about what is the best bonding agent and you think your treatment plan acceptance is high. You don't even know the number. And I'm always, and all the noise in dentistry is, it's kind of like let's say instead of dentists, we're all chefs. Everything out there is telling you to lasagna. No, to go Mexican. No, add pizza. Add a chicken. You always want to make some new dish. But you know what? There's a successful restaurant that sells every kind of dish. Like you're talking about the beginning, purpose and mindset. There's restaurants that have a different purpose of what they think, what type of food. The food, the genre, the purpose of your food, your dish, that's not the problem. The problem is the business of that restaurant, the business of dentistry. Hire a consultant. They're always the greatest return on investment. So, Kristin, if my homies go to Kristin with a K, Kristin, Pelletier, Pelletier, what are they going to find at KristinPelletier.com?
Well, the first thing that I would recommend is subscribing to my blog. I put out probably 2 videos per month, and it's not my blog and my videos. If you subscribe to that, it's not selling or promoting services. They're just short nuggets of information that can help with things like mindset and case acceptance and what to do when you feel like you want to vent about a team member. Who should you vent to and things like that. So I would say the first thing to do would be to subscribe to my twice a month video newsletter. And there's also a practice profitability kit, which will give them some information on how to get started monitoring your numbers. It's not a comprehensive system, but it's a complementary kit to get you started on looking at your practice numbers. So that's where I would recommend starting. And then also just reaching out to me. I do complimentary get acquainted calls or consultation calls that, again, aren't designed to listen to a sales pitch. If they have something they want to bounce off or have an idea or a concern, I'm happy to do that complimentary consultation so they can get to know.
How much is a consultation call?
The 30-minute consultation call is complimentary.
Okay, what is that? What is that number?
It's 918-459-4624. But there's also a contact form on my website that they can submit a request to set up a complimentary consultation. And if they want something more involved, we can talk about that. But if they just have an issue or want to run something by me, I'm happy to do that so they can get to know me and my philosophy and style on how I would make a recommendation.
So what's the phone number again?
918-459 4624.
And what's your email?
Kristin at KristinPelletier.com.
And the website is KristinPelletier.com. By the way, on your, I love your blogs. I've read several of them. Dentaltown has a blog section. If you're already writing all that stuff, you ought to post it on Dentaltown too, because there's 250,000 people on that website. There's over 30,000 unique dentists a month, and it's always people searching for something. If you already got the content, I'd just repost it on Dentaltown too. But I called you to be on this podcast. You didn't call me. My homies think you're the bomb. What states do you work in mostly?
Right now, I have clients in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Colorado, Maine, Connecticut, and I think that's it right now.
Right on. And
I'm sorry, I forgot one. Virginia.
None in Kansas?
No.
Where's my homies in Wichita?
I've never had a client in Kansas. I would love to work in Kansas.
But I love I've always said that, it's the businesses that were started in small America, like Walmart in Little Bentonville. He had to pioneer no questions asked refunds because he said he only had 5,000 people and he couldn't piss off anybody in 5,000. It seems like all the greatest customer service, value-oriented companies didn't really come from Manhattan and LA. It's always rural, and I think that some of the greatest consultants I've ever met in dentistry were from the flyover states. They're just keeping it real in the flyover states. So, Kristin, this podcast is only successful because I'm able to get amazing people like you on. Thank you so much today for spending an hour of your life with my homies.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.